Coach Sully, Reps and Sweat Martial Arts and Fitness. This is Mat Chat. So today's Mat Chat is for you parents who are considering enrolling your kids in martial arts or already have kids that are in martial arts and are wondering, how do I keep these kids in martial arts? You know, kids, they like one thing one day and don't like it the next day, and martial arts requires such a long-term commitment and the benefits are so great. How do we get them in martial arts and how do we keep them in martial arts? So I'm gonna go over some tips and showing you guys what you need to do to keep them motivated and keep them inspired to continue with martial arts. Now, first of all, we know the benefits of martial arts. It teaches the kids discipline, it gives them structure, it gives them fitness, it gives them self-defense. We are, as parents, always worried about our kids, always worried about our safety. And when our kids know how to fend for themselves, how to defend themselves, that takes a huge worry burden off of our chests. So most parents would love for their kids to know how to defend themselves. But how do we get the kids excited about learning how to defend themselves? We can't be the only ones that are motivated. The kids, once they get to a certain age, they're gonna do what they wanna do. So we're gonna have to learn how to gently nudge them in a direction so that they stay in martial arts and they continue with martial arts. So the first thing that you need to do when enrolling your kids is try to enroll them as young as possible. When they're younger, they have, and I hate to say it, but they have less say-so over what they do. So they got to do what you tell them to do. So put them in martial arts. They're going to meet the other kids there. It's just going to be an everyday thing. When you enrolled your child into preschool, you didn't give them an option and say, oh, okay, if you don't like it after a few months, we're pulling you out. They just went to school because you took them to school. You can do the same thing with martial arts. And before you choose a school, make sure you go by there and make sure you like the vibe of it. Make sure it's something that's fun, because if it's fun, that I believe will be the strongest thing to keep them in the game. We gotta make sure that it's fun. We gotta make sure that they're vibing with the rest of the kids. So do your research, look around, see which places the kids are having the most fun on the mats, and go with that. The next thing that we wanna do is we wanna lead by example. Now, what I mean by that is that if we're trying to convince our kids that martial arts is this great thing, their next question, if we're not doing it, is why aren't we doing it? So the best way to encourage your child to either start martial arts or continue martial arts is for them to see you in martial arts and continuing martial arts. You got to practice what you preach. If martial arts is so great, if martial arts is something that you feel is necessary for them, it should also be necessary for you. So we got to lead by example. Don't try to live vicariously through the kids. A lot of times we'll get our kids enrolled in martial arts, and because we're putting too much pressure on them to become the martial artists that we never became, that makes them push away and not want to be involved in martial arts anymore. So we have to be careful that we're not pushing them too hard. We're not trying to vicariously live through them. We're not those parents at the tournaments that are screaming at the referees. Sometimes as parents, if you do too much pushing, if you're too much in the mix, that embarrasses the kid and that makes the kid not want to continue with martial arts. Don't try to force them. If you really see that they genuinely are not interested in martial arts, don't try to force them. Because they might be interested later. What you end up doing when you try to force them, now, if they're younger, you can get away with forcing them a little bit. But once they start to get to the age where they are making decisions on their own, where they're choosing what they're going to wear to school, you can't force them at that point. You can't make them do what they don't want to do. And if you drag them in there, now I get it, a little nudge when they're feeling tired after school and they don't want to go. But when you see a just overall non-interest in martial arts, I think it's a good idea to back off and go with their wishes on that. What you want to do, what you don't want to do, is make it that thing that my parents used to make me do that I don't want any part of it for the rest of my life. A lot of times, and this is something that I see a lot on the mats, the kid went through a phase where they're into martial arts, they get away from it, and then they step back on the mats when they're in their later teens and early 20s. That fire, that spark gets reignited. And when we try to force them, we almost guarantee that that spark never reignites. So as parents, we want to, and like I said, especially when they start making their own decisions, we want to frame martial arts as something that's available for them if they decide that they want to participate. So we cannot force them. Make sure they're having fun. And like I said earlier, when you're picking a school, make sure that those instructors are playing games. A lot of times, some of these schools are almost too structured. And you got to think about it. The kid is spending 8 hours a day in a structured environment. You want that martial arts school to almost be like playtime for them. And I think that that's going to be the determining factor of a good kids program, is if you're seeing the kids playing a lot of games. You know, if the mats, when you step on and the mats are, not chaotic, but you can feel the energy on the mats. The kids are using their voice. It's loud in a structured way, but it's still loud. You can feel that energy. You want to make sure that those things are present. If your mats are looking like basic training in the military for a bunch of kids, then that might be a red flag. You can almost guarantee it that it's going to get to a certain point where the kid is going to feel like it's more of an obligation and not something that's fun. So we got to make sure that the environment, whatever place we decide to take them, we got to make sure that the instructors know how to make the whole ordeal fun for them. That's going to be very important. Now, if your kid decides that they do not want to do martial arts anymore, you got to back off. You cannot force them to do martial arts. And I'll use myself as an example. When my kids were younger, all of my kids, I have 4 of them, 3 adults at this point and 1 teenager, but all of them had access to martial arts. None of them decided to take martial arts to the level that I decided to take in my own life, but they all had access to it. They all have a solid foundation and are able to defend themselves. You know, they've all put years on the mats. So they're very familiar with martial arts, and it's just something that they decided not to continue anymore. But at that point, my job is done. I gave them the access. I exposed them to the skill set to where they have a solid understanding of it. They have tools to be able to defend themselves. They've learned a lot of the lessons that were to be learned on the mats, and they decided to step away from it. I'm not hurt about it. I did my job. Mission accomplished. And my approach was to always invite them. And that's why it's so important for our parents to, I think it's very important for the parents to train too. You can't try to make the case that this is something that they need to be doing that's so beneficial for them, but you don't have it in your life. You're not practicing, you're not training in your life. And I think that example of them seeing how martial arts benefits someone long term, that's going to make sure that seed is always in their brain. The example. You cannot get better than the example. And by you training as a parent, what that also does is that gives them insider access to martial arts that they can take advantage of at any point in their lives. So the best thing that you can give them is your example and access. You can't force them. You can't make them do it. You can't nudge them. You can't live through them. You can only give them your example and access. And I think that if you break it down to simply that, it'll make your task a lot easier to accomplish. You can't be pushing for them to join martial arts, and you can't even give them any insight on which martial arts they should go with. You don't have any school recommendations because you're not in martial arts. And kids look at, not listen, they look at what we do more than they listen to what we say. So if we want to teach them something or guide them, our best guidance is going to be our example. So if you want your kids to stay in martial arts, make sure you stay in martial arts. If you want your kids to be interested in martial arts, you have to provide the access to it. All right, guys, gotta run. Coach Sully, Reps and Sweat Martial Arts and Fitness. This was Matt Chat.